He worked hard. He was too quiet, and at some point he began to fear not poverty, but the fact that someone inside him had grown accustomed to it. I spent half my life believing I had to earn the right to exist, not to live, to exist. Every word I said was filtered through fear. Will they like this? Am I good enough? Did I take too much space? That's how poverty begins, not in your wallet, in your mind. The day you ask permission to breathe, you've already sold your soul for approval. There's a kind of poverty no one talks about. It looks clean, polite, even educated. You wake up every morning, put on your invisible mask, and walk into a world where everyone smiles, but no one is free. You make yourself smaller, softer, quieter, hoping that one day someone will see how much you've sacrificed and reward you for it. They won't. The world doesn't pay for silence. It feeds on it. I used to think kindness meant obedience. My mother would whisper, "Don't answer back, Isaac. Be good, and life will be kind." She was wrong, and she was right. She didn't lie out of malice. She said it because she was tired of fighting. That's what generations of poor minds do. They trade their fire for safety and call it virtue. Years later, sitting in my empty kitchen, I understood something brutal. I wasn't poor because I lacked money. I was poor because I waited for someone else to give me permission to stop being poor. I worked like a dog, smiled through humiliation, explained myself to people who didn't care. I thought dignity was something to earn. It's not. It's something to protect, especially from yourself. The worst kind of begging isn't for bread or coins. It's when you beg for love, when you try to prove to someone that you're worth keeping, when you chase affection like a stray dog that once had a home. That's real poverty, when you confuse approval with connection. One evening, after another long day of pleasing everyone but myself, I looked in the mirror and saw a stranger. Not a failure, worse. A man who'd traded truth for peace. A man who'd survived everything except his own reflection. That's when I realized the beggar lives inside, and until you silence that voice, the one that whispers, "You're not enough," you'll always be starving, no matter how full your table is. My mother used to say, "Even if you have nothing, don't act like it." Back then I laughed. Now I understand. She wasn't talking about pride. She was talking about ownership, about remembering that you're not a guest in this world. You are its participant. You have the right to want, to rest, to speak, to refuse. I'm not here to sell you motivation. I'm too old for slogans. I'm here to tell you what nobody told me when I was still worth saving. Stop waiting for permission to live, because nobody's coming to set you free except you. And when that truth finally hits you, it'll hurt more than poverty ever did. But it'll also be the first honest pain of your life. What comes next isn't about money. It's about the first Jewish truth they never told you. And once you hear it, you'll never see being poor the same way again. People talk about money like it's a god. They chase it, fear it, blame it, adore it. But money isn't the problem. Lack is. That silent addiction to emptiness, the comfort of not enough. You think you want abundance, but deep down, you're terrified of it. Real freedom means no longer hiding behind excuses, and that's unbearable for most. I learned this truth in the ugliest way. There was a time when I had everything a man could want, a name that mattered, people who listened, a woman who believed in me. And still, every morning, I woke up with a feeling I knew too well, that something was missing, not because I didn't have enough, but because I didn't know how to feel enough. It's strange how the soul can starve in a full house. You see, the poor mind is clever. It can turn gratitude into guilt and success into sin. You tell yourself, I don't deserve this, and life agrees. You say, I can't ask for more, and the universe replies, as you wish. Every word you whisper about yourself becomes a law you live under. That's why the first secret is not about earning more. It's about unlearning the language of scarcity. When I was young, I used to walk past the synagogue after work. There was an old rabbi sitting near the door. He never begged, never spoke, just sat there with a small cup of tea. One evening I asked him, "How can you sit here with nothing and still look so peaceful?" He smiled and said, "Because I know what's mine can't be taken, and what isn't mine can't stay." That sentence haunted me for years. Only later I understood wealth is not measured in possession, but in absence of fear. The poorest people I ever met wore expensive suits. They couldn't stop proving themselves. Their smiles were rehearsed, their laughter delayed. They worked not for joy, but for validation. And the cruelest part, they called it ambition. No, my dear, ambition without self-worth is just another kind of slavery, one that pays better but costs more. I remember a woman I once treated. She'd grown up in a small village, saved every coin, built a business from nothing. When she finally made it, she couldn't sleep. Not because she lost everything, because she couldn't stop checking if it was still there. Her hand shook when she counted money, not from greed, but from terror. Poverty had left her, but she never left poverty. That's what happens when lack becomes your religion. You pray to not lose and forget how to live. Lack teaches you to settle. It tells you that almost is fine, that silence is safer than honesty, that you should be grateful for crumbs. It trains you to see life as a favor instead of a gift. And you start performing humility instead of feeling it. To stop thinking like a beggar, you must confront the comfort of smallness. Stop making friends with fear. Stop calling your resignation peace. Nothing grows in the soil of not enough. You cannot build a full life with half-truths. I'm not saying you should be reckless. I'm saying you should stop pretending that your chains are jewelry. Every time you shrink yourself to fit someone's expectations, you confirm your own poverty. Real wealth begins when you stop negotiating with your worth. That's the first secret. And the world won't teach it, because the world needs you hungry to keep you quiet. The next truth is harsher. It's the reason most people stay small, even when life opens the door. You'll see why abundance scares those who crave it most. Don't look away. If even one phrase touched you today, it's no coincidence. It means you're already beginning to see the difference between poverty and the habit of thinking poor. Subscribe if this silence without lies resonates with you, and write in the comments when you first caught yourself thinking, I used to live like that too. We don't give advice here. Here, we give you back what you gave away to others long ago, your inner strength, because you are not poor. You've just been silent for too long. They say people are afraid to fail. That's not true. Most people are terrified to succeed, because then there's no one left to blame. When you've spent your whole life asking for permission, owning anything, your time, your peace, your worth, feels like theft. You start to wonder, did I take too much? As if dignity had a limit, as if joy was something to apologize for. I've seen people sabotage their own breakthroughs because they couldn't stand the silence that came after. They were addicted to struggle. It gave them something to talk about. Without the drama, they didn't know who they were. I remember the first time someone praised my work without conditions. No backhanded compliment, no polite nod, just respect. And you know what I felt? Not pride, not relief, guilt. I looked down, I deflected, I changed the subject, because somewhere deep inside, I believed I hadn't earned it. That's what poverty of the soul does. It teaches you to flinch at kindness and question every good thing that comes your way. We don't talk enough about this. We talk about fighting for what we deserve. But no one prepares you for receiving it. No one warns you how uncomfortable it is to get what you asked for. Because once it's in your hands, you can't pretend anymore. You can't blame anyone else. And that's when people run. Back to chaos, back to noise, back to familiar pain. Ownership demands honesty. It forces you to look at the mirror and say, "This is mine, and so is the responsibility." No more waiting, no more performing, no more excuses. That's terrifying for someone who's lived under the shadow of almost their entire life. You've probably felt it too. That moment when someone gives you a real opportunity, and instead of stepping forward, you hesitate. You smile politely, say you're not ready, make yourself small again. It's not humility. It's fear dressed as modesty. It's the mind saying, "I don't belong here." But you do. Not because someone approved it, not because you've ticked every box, but because this life is yours. You don't owe an explanation for being visible. You don't have to justify your peace. When you think like a beggar, even blessings feel heavy. You wait for the punishment. You scan the horizon for something to go wrong. You call it being realistic. No, that's not realism. That's trauma. They told us to be humble. Fine. But somewhere along the way, we confused humility with self-erasure. We learned to dim our light so others wouldn't feel insecure. We called it wisdom. But wisdom doesn't shrink. It doesn't apologize for existing. The second truth is this: it takes courage to receive. It takes strength to stay whole when you're finally seen, and it takes a new mind to carry the life you say you want. So no, success isn't the reward. It's the test, and most people fail it, not because they can't rise, but because they don't believe they should. Somewhere along the way, they told you silence means defeat, that if you don't explain, argue, or prove, you've lost. That's a lie. The need to constantly explain yourself is the habit of the poor, not the financially poor, the internally poor. Because when you know who you are, you stop auditioning. I used to think I had to justify every choice. Why I left, why I stayed, why I was tired, why I wasn't smiling. There was always a script in my mouth. I thought people deserved access to my reasons, that my worth depended on their understanding. It didn't. Here's what no one tells you. You don't owe anyone a performance. Your dignity isn't up for debate. And your silence? That's your final word. It took me decades to learn that. I'd walk away from betrayal and still explain myself. I'd swallow disrespect and still make peace. I thought I was being kind, but I wasn't kind. I was terrified of being misunderstood, and that fear kept me poor, not in money, in self-respect. Real silence isn't passive. It's not weakness. It's a full sentence with no apology at the end. It's the moment you decide that your peace matters more than their comfort. When you stop defending what should have been protected. I once watched a woman in my clinic, a strong one, sharp, had survived more than most. She sat there, looking exhausted, not physically, but soul-tired. I asked her what she needed. She said, "I need to stop explaining why I'm not okay with being treated like a convenience." That sentence stayed with me for years, because that's what most people never learn, that the moment you stop over-explaining, you start healing. When you think like a beggar, you believe silence is dangerous. You think people will leave, attack, twist your stillness into guilt. So you speak too much, you clarify, you fix, you make sure no one's uncomfortable. That's not love. That's self-erasure with a smile on top. Some silences are loud with truth. When someone disrespects you and you say nothing, not because you're scared, but because you've outgrown the need to be heard. That's power. When they expect a reaction and get none, that's clarity. That's the wealth of knowing your value isn't determined by how well you explain your pain. You don't need to slam doors. You don't need to scream. You just need to stop offering your soul like it's on discount. The third truth is brutal. Silence is the language of the free. Not everyone will understand it, but that's the point. It's not for them, it's for you. So the next time someone asks why you've changed, don't answer. Live it. Peace has no press release. Dignity doesn't owe you a speech. There's a kind of pride that ruins people quietly, the kind that says, "Look how much I can take," as if endurance alone is a virtue, as if carrying pain for years without complaint makes you strong. No, that makes you numb, and numbness is not power. It's prison with soft walls. I used to admire people who stayed through everything. Toxic jobs, cold marriages, fake friendships. I thought they were brave. But what I was really admiring was self-abandonment dressed as loyalty. Somewhere along the line you were taught that survival equals strength, that if you didn't break, you won. But surviving isn't the goal. Living is. And the difference? Living requires choice. Survival just needs tolerance. A woman once told me, "But I made it through." Yes, you made it through. But what did it cost you? How much of yourself did you leave behind in the rooms you never should have entered? How many apologies did you whisper just to keep the peace? How many mornings did you wake up dreading the life you convinced yourself you had to endure? This is what no one says out loud. Strength is not how much you can take. It's how quickly you can walk away when something dishonors you. You don't need to be endlessly resilient. You need to be honest about what hurts, what drains, what no longer fits. Because your soul doesn't grow in war zones. It grows in safety. And most of the time, that safety begins with one terrifying word: no. But beggar thinking doesn't like no. It tells you to stay, to adjust, to compromise just a little longer. It whispers, "Be grateful. It could be worse. At least you're not alone." And so you shrink again and again until you can barely recognize the shape of your own life. I've watched too many good people waste decades waiting for things to get better. They stayed loyal to their pain. They called it endurance. But really, it was fear. Fear of starting over. Fear of choosing themselves. Fear of stepping into the unknown without a script. But what if the life you want is on the other side of that fear? What if healing isn't soft? What if it starts with rage, silence, distance? What if choosing peace means disappointing everyone who built their comfort on your sacrifice? I know this isn't easy, but I'll tell you the truth most won't. You can't live fully and keep everything you survived. Some things have to be left behind, even if they were once your whole world. So here's the fourth truth. You are not what you've endured. You are what you refuse to carry forward. Let go of the badge of survival. You've already proven you can survive. Now show yourself you can live. At this age, I don't speak to be heard. I speak because silence has a weight. And sometimes what you carry alone becomes lighter when someone simply says, "I see it too. That's why I'm here. Not to give you answers, not to promise you success, but to look you in the eye and say, you've already survived enough. You don't need to earn your life anymore. You just need to stop giving it away." The hardest part about leaving beggar thinking behind isn't the fear. It's the habit. The way you keep reaching for people who never reached for you. The way you over-explain simple truths just to feel allowed. The way you say yes with a smile and then sit in the dark wondering why you feel so empty. It's not that you're weak. It's that no one ever told you. Your no is holy. Your absence is power. Your boundaries are not punishments. And your peace does not require a vote. I've spent years watching people exhaust themselves chasing approval that was never theirs to begin with. And when they finally stopped running, the first thing they said wasn't, "I feel strong." It was, "I feel strange." Because when you stop living like a beggar, the silence feels suspicious at first. You miss the noise, the drama, the chaos that made you feel alive. But over time, something deeper grows. Not excitement, not euphoria, clarity. And that's when you begin, not as someone new, but as someone you forgot you always were. Let them call you distant. Let them say you changed. Let them miss the version of you who tolerated everything. You're not here to be understood. You're here to be real. To stop measuring your worth in the reaction of others. To stand in your own skin without explanation. The world doesn't need another strong woman who holds it all together. The world needs one who knows what to drop and walks away with her head high. You've heard enough voices telling you to fix yourself. Enough advice from people who never lived your pain. Enough rules about who you should be to be worthy. So I'll leave you with this, not as a rule, but as a reminder. You are already worthy, not because you proved it, because you exist, because you breathe, because you woke up this morning still holding on to a soul that's been through hell and didn't harden. Let that be enough. And if one day you forget it again, come back to this, not because I said it, but because deep down you already knew.